Here's your recipe, one worth keeping, one I'm sure you're going to put in your permanent file. This is ranch style beans. It's morning. I'm having a little coffee and planning out the recipe for today, which is ranch style beans. I've already put out a ranch style beans recipe 6 years ago. I posted that on my channel. Never expected it to do much. It's done quite well. The thing of it is, ranch beans, that's kind of a subjective term, and it can mean a lot of different things. And then people will say, no, this is charro beans, or no, this is cowboy beans, or whatever. And ladies and gentlemen, for the most part, they're all so similar that it's hard to tell them apart. This is going to be not too different from my original recipe, but I'm bumping it up a bit. We're going to make a few additions. We're going to change the measurements on this a little bit and change the approach. This is ranch style beans, and it is a delicious recipe, and I'm so looking forward to sharing this with you. We're going to get in the kitchen. We're going to get busy cooking this up. Ranch beans aren't hard, but this is the kind of video you need to watch in advance and then get everything together and make it. There's a few steps that need to be observed that, well, they take a little bit of time. It's good to start the day before. So we're going to get in the kitchen now. I want to show you the ingredients, and then we're going to get busy making the most delicious batch of ranch beans you're going to ever have the pleasure of making. Come on, let's go. This starts with our pinto beans, but is flavored with all these goodies. In the way of wonderful goodies, we've got some onion, jalapeno, garlic, cilantro, some beautiful ham, and to flavor this thing up with, on the far end I have some cayenne, sage, oregano, cumin, and paprika, and salt right over here. Folks, this makes for some delicious ranch beans. It is a little bit more robust in flavor, and it is worth your time to make it. Now let's get busy cooking up this pot of beans. I need to get everything diced out. Now in this game, dice size matters, okay? If you don't want to worry about it, don't. But I like putting a little effort into this cutting part, and I think it's fun too. I'm going to teach you how we remove the heat from a jalapeno and how we process it out. And we're going to dice these to about 3/16 of an inch square. That's halfway in between an 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, okay? This right up here, we're going to take it and we're going to dice it into a nice 1/4 inch square dice on our onion, and I'm going to show you a really easy way to get that done. It is so easy and so safe to cut this way. This right here, this is our ham, and these are about 1/2 inch square chunks of ham, and that's what we're going to be putting down in there. I like the ham to stand out because I've always enjoyed getting a nice chunk of ham while I'm enjoying my beans, and to have 2 or 3 in there, well, that's just like a gold mine, all right? These, let's get busy cutting them up, and I'll show you all of the little tricks that I know that make this easier. We're going to start with the jalapenos, and I'm going to start by putting on some gloves. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't use gloves when you handle stuff like this, even if you scrub your hands really super well and you think you got it all off, 2 or 3 hours later, you're going to scratch in a sensitive spot on your body and discover that you didn't really get it all off. Removing capsaicin is very hard. Okay, that oil does not like to come off. So what we're going to do is put a barrier between us and the jalapeno. So when it comes to handling chilies, this is one of those little things that I've always recommended people do. It's this right here. This is the smart thing to do, because all you got to do is take off the gloves and, well, you're ready to move on with life. Okay, these chilies are a bit old and they're kind of rough looking, and I think they're going to be just fine though. We're going to cut them open and see what we get. First thing, when you're going to handle a knife that has a wide blade like this one, pinch it, okay? Wrap your fingers around the handle and use these two fingers to pinch that blade. The whole idea behind that is when you're cutting on stuff, and sometimes it's hard to cut through something and you're having to put too much force on the knife, and this may have happened to you before, sometimes the knife flops over sideways really fast, and sometimes it's facing where you don't want it to be facing, like your other hand, you know, and that happens, and that's because that blade can roll no matter how tight you grip back here. But if you pinch that blade, it cannot turn or roll in your hand. It's stable. Do that, get used to it, and it's safer. We're going to remove this stem, so just simply turn your fingertips under the center of that knuckle up and down and ride this knife along that knuckle like this. So when you're going to cut a crown or whatever off, just like that. And when you're cutting multiple things, this becomes a guide to that cutting, all right? That's your guide. And as long as the fingertips are turned under, they are safe. We call this, bam, that right there we call the crab technique. This keeps us safe while we're cutting, and it's the smartest thing to do. Now sometimes it's hard to do, but thumb behind, fingers turned under, even something narrow like this, it's a safe way to cut with. Okay, so please use that technique. It's very smart. I want to show that to you one more time. Let me turn. This is the smallest one of all of them that I have, so it's a good one for this lesson. So for this camera right here, what I did is I had my fingers turned under just like this with the thumb behind. Then I took my knife and, allowing it to run right on this knuckle, I glided that knife along it. Okay, that's how we do that safely on a narrow item. To get the heat out of the jalapeno, all right, some of us don't like the heat, and some of us just don't like that core. I don't like seeing the little seeds in my beans, okay? Some folks don't like it. Some folks like it a lot, and they get upset when they see me do this stuff. Well, I'm sorry, but guess what? I need to teach my audience how to decore and de-seed chilies, okay? So here it is. Isn't this fun? Now sometimes they do what they did right there where it just kind of splits on you. Don't worry about it. Just keep going on with life. A little tap will sometimes remove any excess seeds. Sometimes not. Alrighty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get all of the rest of these done this exact same way, and all of this cleaned up so that we can move on to the next step. So we have the chilies. They are all cored, and that's just, it's so very simple, as you saw. To cut a chili, there's a couple of ways. If your knife is extremely sharp, you can get away with doing this, okay? But most people don't have knives that will cut quite that well. So let me show you something that really works better. Most knives will cut a chili easily from the inside out. So please do it that way. And take your time on this. There's no rush. Remember, fingertips turned under. Let me show you that again. And thumb behind, okay? So I'm gliding that knife along my knuckles. And I do that through the whole thing. Here at the end, sometimes just go with a rocking motion. I want to do that same technique with each and every one of these. Let's get right over to the dicing. Now remember, I said we wanted a little dice, and that's what we're going for here. Let me get that little one under there. Cool. So, now what I do when I'm holding a bunch like this, I've got my little pinky right down here against the board, right over here, and pushed up against this, and my fingers kind of rolled over but still curled
under, like so, with that thumb again behind. Sometimes the thumb, I'll use it behind stuff or over here to keep it under control. But for the most part, that's when I'll use that pushing the knife forward technique, and I'm keeping the fingers rolled under, and that works really good that way. So I get a really good cut and nice dice. Now my dice are a little uneven right there. Unfortunately, when I'm trying to cut for the camera, that's a little more difficult than just cutting for myself, which I keep the angle a little different. Before I can get busy cutting up an onion, I need to take off the top of the onion, keep the root end intact. The reason is when it comes to the moisture or the juice coming from the inside of an onion, depending on which end you cut it, one end it'll leak those juices out faster. From that root end, they come out faster. So we start by cutting the stem end to give us a flat spot to keep the onion from rolling around as we work it. Really smart idea, something I recommend. The other thing is I'm going to take a close look at my onion when I get it opened up like this. I look at the end, and one of these outer layers gets thin in one spot, and I think it's that one right there gets thin right about here. And so that's generally where I like to just cut right up through there. And I know I've cut through that and probably the second layer too. That won't matter because I'm only removing that outer layer, and only because it gets thin in some spots, and in those spots you don't get as good a quality of onion. Now this may seem wasteful, but I really recommend this. Otherwise you sometimes get less desirable chunks of onion in your food. You may have experienced that before. Again, with proper cutting technique and being really safe about it. So if I want to teach you the safe way of handling that knife, it comes to pinch the blade again and get good control. The next thing is I want to cut the onion straight down and turn it into two halves. The technique I'm going to show you today when it comes to how to dice an onion is a real easy technique. So most of the time when I teach dicing an onion, I teach the same way a culinary school teaches, which is you take a half of an onion and then you cross cut it this way, and then you make cuts this way, and then you make cuts this way, and you get beautiful dice. Today, I'm going to teach you the same thing without one of the steps. So we're going to add a step by quartering our onion. Now, I can take this and turn it into beautiful diced onion. Let me show you what I do. I'm going to start by making some downward cuts here and here. Then I'm going to roll the onion over. I'm going to make them again here and here. And then I'm going to make my cross cuts, and you get perfect dice that way. So you get that same three-dimensional cut there and there. And then I roll it, and I can do another one up here and one down here, and then, and sometimes this happens, don't worry about that, then, see, when I do this, suddenly, what comes off of the end here, look at this, look at these dice. See how everything has a uniform shape and size to it, and that's the whole idea behind a dicing technique like this one. And it gives you very little waste also, okay? So, not too much waste, goes away. I'll do the rest of these the same way, and I want to go ahead. Okay, I had to get a good fry pan there. I need that because I'm going to be cooking off both my onion and my jalapeno. Now, I like to go ahead and cook these down just a little bit to develop some flavors. And what we in the cooking world call this is called stacking flavors, where we do one process and then add that process to the main dish, and it adds flavor to it, and it works like a charm. I like to put things out in the order that they're going to go in. All right, so my spices all get lined up together, and these are the last items here. So all in order as to how I use them. I cook this way because when I do it and I really get going, and let's say I've got 5 or 6 different dishes I'm doing, when I have everything lined out in a certain way, those recipes just click away like no problem at all. Let's get right into cooking this. This starts with the onion, and then we add in that jalapeno after the onion gets going. I've been heating my pan. I want that pan so when I throw water in it, the water just kind of skates around. All right, and then it's good and hot. That's when you get that searing temperature. That's also when you get a temperature that extracts new and special flavors from food, or I should say it develops those flavors. You're changing something through the application of higher heat, and it's important that it start the right way. If you're going to sear a food, whether it be an onion or a steak, either way, that pan needs to be the right temperature before you start. Let's test that pan again. Look at the difference in what's happening. If you'll notice, that pan is almost at the right temperature. Not quite, but very, very close. And I'm going to let it finish heating just for a little bit longer. So far, this has actually been heating over a medium-high heat for about 2 minutes. It's got a pretty thick clad base. It's a commercial grade pan. The thing of it is this right here, if I heat it over a high heat, then it gets hotter out here and not as hot in the middle. If I heat it over a medium or medium high heat, that burner is heating this spot first, so it comes in and out simultaneously, and I get a more uniform heat. You can also see that when you throw the water in there, it was starting to cook off faster over here than it wanted to in the middle. There it is. This is that neat little temperature. We learned this lesson in school. It's a guy named Leidenfrost that taught us what happens when water hits a surface that's sufficiently hot. It forms a vapor barrier. At that same temperature, ladies and gentlemen, that's when you start getting a really good quality sear on your food. That causes flavor. This is important because I want a little bit of browning. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit of browning. Again, stacking flavors. We're building up deeper tones, richer flavors by doing this one step. This has been sitting here for a couple of minutes. Let me flip that. Look at that. Look at this. See the little bit of browning on the edges. Okay. That brown equals incredible, intense flavor that is going to be imparted into this special dish of beans that we're making. This, as I mentioned, important step. In a moment, we'll put in the jalapeno. Remember, the onion is a little bit bigger, so it's going to take it a little longer to cook, so we start it first. It's just all there is to it. All right, I've got good caramelization starting there. I'm going to go ahead and get my jalapeno right down in there. Oh yes, it doesn't hurt to hit it with just a little extra oil. Not going to hurt a thing. There we go. Look at that beautiful brown edges, that color going on. Oh, that's just deep, rich flavor being developed right there, ladies and gentlemen. That is what delicious looks like. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? All of that color. And remember, certain things do matter. Heating the pan first. Then get your oil and your food in there. These are part of the techniques that, number one, ensure you get good release when you're cooking. You notice nothing is sticking on my pan, and it doesn't because I cook properly. This also helps to develop the right flavors. That initial sear, that's part of flavor development. I'm going to give this about another 2 minutes. I'm going to turn off the burner, and then we're going to get started on building our beans. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've noticed my beans right here, they are plump and full and ready to go. Let me explain to you what I did to these beans before now. I took these and about 12 hours ago put them down in water, started soaking them. I added a couple of tablespoons of salt to this. And what I have noticed is when you brine the beans overnight, it will tenderize the skins and they will soften up so they cook quickly. Also, the bean cooks a little bit faster. It doesn't seem to make the beans themselves salty, but it does affect the quality of the bean when it comes to the skins and how quickly and easily they cook. Also, how tender they are when they're cooked. It's not a bad thing. I have drained them off. I've got enough water in here to cover it by about a ½ inch. I might need to add 1 or 2 extra cups of water, just depending on what I get when everything's added. I've got to start putting in all of my other ingredients. I'm going to put some heat underneath it to start with, and we'll get all of the goodies in there to make this what it's supposed to be. It's time to start getting goodies in the pot. Let me put a flame underneath that. I'm going to start it on a high flame, not a big thing. My garlic, give it a little bit of a twist, and that pops right off. You know, that is a really super easy method for working your garlic. Let me get this up close in frame here. Just give it a twist like that. The whole thing stays intact. But that paper, just like that right there, just slips right off. You don't need a tube to roll it in or bowls to shake it in or any number of other ways of doing it. Some people just crush the clove and pick the paper off the outside. I don't like that because then I've got that garlic smell on my fingers. And if I do this, the cloves aren't broken and the paper is off of it and I'm rid of my issue right there. I have my knife out here because I want to do 2 things. Number 1, I want to remove the callus from the very end of that clove of garlic. Like so. Where's the last one? Right there. There we go. And we'll get those cloves out of here. And the knife will also be good for crushing this. Always make sure when you do this that you angle the edge of the knife down and then just push down on it hard enough to kind of break the clove apart. You don't have to just go crazy crushing it into small pieces, okay? If it's broken open, it's going to release its juices just fine right there. The next thing I want to get into this right here. That's nothing but flavor right there. Nothing but solid, absolutely fantastic flavor. And I'm going to switch to something that'll mix things into this water a little bit better. Even though it might seem weird, a whisk, believe it or not, is just suited for this. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get a little salt in there, but not much. Maybe there's a ½ teaspoon, maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon right there. Here's the paprika. Now, sometimes it'll stick in the bowl, so I give it a shake, and I still make a mess. There we go. That was the sage. This is the cumin. You know, when you work with these long enough, you get to where you just spot them. That right there, that is my cayenne. And this is oregano. Oh, yes. So, oops, here we are. Get this. Use it to disperse that spice. Get it worked in there. This is going to have to come up in temperature and start boiling. Now, as far as that cilantro goes, I can cut up my cilantro and put it in now if I want, but frankly, I find that I get a much better flavor if I add that within the last 30 minutes of cooking. So it can be 30 minutes from the end or 10 minutes from the end, but it seems to do best at the end. All right, there we go. Everything's mixed. When it comes to a boil, we're going to cover it. We're going to let it simmer. This is going to take about an hour to an hour and a half, and we'll know they're ready when the beans are tender and soft and ready to eat. My beans have been cooking for about an hour. they have cooked down, so they need a little water in there. And I have boiled some water for the purpose of adding to this. That way I don't mess up my cook or slow it down. Now we're at a fluid level that's back to where I'm wanting it, just slightly covering the beans. So basically I added maybe a cup to a cup and a half of water to this after simmering it for an hour. So I'm going to cover it back up. The beans are now soft, but they're not tender enough for me. I want to give this about another 20 to 25 minutes of cooking. And while I'm doing that, I have one other chore to take care of. Let's go ahead and get that cilantro taken care of. Now what I'm going to do here is where it's just kind of really tender, I'm going to fold that over and then start cutting from there. If I was wanting a garnish, well, then I would just be plucking the leaves. But in this case, I'm adding this for flavor. So right there, I have about 2 tablespoons worth of chopped, excuse me, worth of chopped cilantro right there. And I'm putting that down in my beans. We're going to get that cooked in. And this is in the last 20 minutes of cooking, so it's just the right time. There we go. Get that cilantro in there. Give it a little stir. That's going to give it a wonderful flavor. I mean, it'll just sparkle and it'll really shine on the flavor of this. But never put that in the beginning of your cooking. Always add it to the very end. And also, a little garnish of cilantro over the top of your beans can be absolutely fantastic. Please give it a try. The quantity of everything that I used for this recipe today started with 1 pound of pinto beans. And no, I didn't say any other kind of bean. If you're going to do ranch beans, it's going to be pinto beans, ladies and gentlemen. That's the way to go. 1 medium onion, yellow or white. You take your pick. 4 jalapenos. Don't worry about the heat. Remember, it gets cut out on those. 4 cloves of garlic. 2 to 3 tablespoons of chopped cilantro. 1.5 cups of diced pork, and that would be ham in this case. You're going to be using 2 to 3 teaspoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of paprika, 1 tablespoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1 teaspoon of sage, 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne. Ladies and gentlemen, outside of that, you're going to need a little time and patience, and you get good beans. Let's take a look at these gorgeous beans. Here we go. A beautiful, beautiful bowl of beans is what this equals right here. Oh man, here's the thing, I've already had some of these. I had to try them out, had to make sure, hey, those are going to be perfect beans or what? And that's what I did, is had a big bowl of these, and I can say right here and now, this is going to be one of the best bowls of beans you've ever tasted. Something that really helps a dish like this is to bring in a garnish. You know, whether it's just something green and simple, like some simple leaves off to the side, or it can be something simple like maybe some onions just on to the side there. Either way, it comes out to an absolutely fantastic item to put with a simple bowl of beans. This is a great recipe, definitely worth your time. Ranch style beans, that's a good choice right there. Now those beans right there, folks. First off, the beans cooked to perfection. They're soft. They're tender. The skin you don't even notice because it was broken down by the salt during the soaking process. It's one of the advantages of salting the water that you soak in, is it breaks down that skin a little bit better and does a beautiful job of it.
The cooking is a little bit shorter as a result, and the whole thing comes out more tender. The flavors in this, the spices blend perfectly, and the flavors are just off the hook good. You're going to really enjoy this when you try it. It's not really that spicy. There's a slight heat just slightly in the back of my mouth, but it's not hot, like hot. It's just good. Thank you very much for watching this one. Please take a look in the description box down below there. You're going to see some links to my website where you can get stuff like this, the recipe, shirts, whatever. There's a lot of stuff there. Take a look around, and if you would, take a look at my channel. That's Texas Cooking Today. There's a lot of recipes for you there. There are a lot, I do mean a lot, of tutorials getting down to the real nitty-gritty of how to do things the right way in the kitchen. Folks, thank you very much for watching, and hey, please enjoy those ranch beans. I will. Heck yeah.